Beloved, we greet you once again in the wonderful name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Today we want to continue with the second part of concerning wisdom that we dealt on last week. We realized that King Solomon, when he had the opportunity to ask God for anything, he asked God for wisdom. And with wisdom came wealth and honor. If he had only asked for wealth, he would have never got wisdom. If he had only asked for honor, he would have never got wisdom. But because he asked for the right thing, he got the right result. My encouragement for you today and to myself is let us ask for the right thing. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 7 says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. It's amazing how he says the pursuit of wisdom must be something that you and I in this life must begin to look for. Wisdom is the principal thing. It's the main thing. Come on, keep the main thing in your life. Go for wisdom. Go for more than anything else. We study so many things, but we need wisdom. We need wisdom from above. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 16 says, how much better is it to get wisdom than gold or silver? Isn't it so much better to get wisdom rather than gold or silver? Gold and silver, it may come and go, but wisdom can last with you a lifetime and be able to help us in every area of life. Today I just want to focus on a definition regarding wisdom. The ability to discern or judge what is true, right, or lasting, insight, common sense, good judgment, the sum of learning through the ages, or knowledge. That is what wisdom is. Wisdom is the ability to discern, the ability to judge, the ability to focus on what is true, right, or lasting insight, common sense, good judgment, the sum of knowledge through the. That's what wisdom is all about. And if we can begin to look at the definition, we realize today that we need wisdom more than ever before. We can learn about wisdom from young children. Patrick at the age of 10 says, never trust a dog to watch your food. Michael at the age of 14, when your dad is mad at you and asks, do I look stupid? Don't answer him. Second thing he says, never tell your mom her diet isn't working. Isn't that wisdom? Wisdom from little children that comes to us. And today you and I must begin to pursue wisdom in life. In our pursuit for wisdom, there's just a few things we're going to focus on. Number one, I don't know everything. We have never arrived on this planet of earth without understanding that we know everything. We are still learning. We still need to be teachable. We still need to be people who are able to understand that though we may have much knowledge in certain fields, but we are still ignorant in others. And so we don't know everything. Years ago, I was traveling with a man to Durban and with his wife, and we were sitting in the car, and he was driving to Durban, but this is his motto. He will overtake on a straight line, and on a broken line, he will keep on the left. And we're trying to tell him that this is not the law of the country, but as far as he was concerned, to overtake on the straight line was normal. It's amazing, some people you can't teach them. Turn to him and say, some people we can't teach them. So help us, Lord, to begin to go on in life. But wisdom is able to be taught. We get wisdom by understanding that we can be taught. The second one is in Ephesians chapter 5 verse 15 to 17. Please read that. But one of the verses there says, be not unwise, but understand what God's will is. You see, when you and I can come to a place where we can understand God's will for our life, we'll never be distracted on the path that we must choose in life. We will know what we must do and what we must not do. It's amazing, for many years I sometimes tried to venture into business areas, and I failed miserably trying to venture into business areas. Because my calling is that of a man of God. And sometimes you want to move away from everything else. And those things don't succeed. And those things don't come right. Because God has called us into this high calling. And sometimes we miss the mark because we don't realize what a high calling we have. So stay on track with what God has called you to. If He's called you to be a good worker in your company, if He's called you to be an accountant, if He's called you to be a teacher, if He's called you to be a doctor or a lawyer, or if He's called you to be an administrator, whatever it is, stay within your field and understand this is God's will and ask Him for wisdom in that particular field. And we are able to excel if we're able to know what God's will is for us in this life. And it says, understand what God's will is for our lives, and we are able to stay on track and never get distracted. Thirdly, wisdom comes from above. And one thing must understand, God gives us wisdom. In James chapter 1 verse 5, he says, ask, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth generously without finding fault. It's amazing how God gives wisdom generously and he doesn't find fault in us. Isn't it so powerful to understand that God gives us wisdom if we can begin to ask? And he doesn't find fault. He doesn't look at the negatives of our life and doesn't give us wisdom. But if we ask him for wisdom, we'll be able to get wisdom from him. Fourthly, never go to a place in life where we think that asking God for wisdom does not matter. In other words, sometimes we think we have arrived at a place and we don't need God's help anymore. You see, that's why most of us suffer, because in everything we must still be able to ask God for wisdom in all matters that we embrace in life. And something we think we can do. But I want to encourage you today, whether you think you can do, whether we don't let money, whether we think we can handle things in life, don't let money, don't let experience, don't let status or position make us believe that we don't need wisdom. In Proverbs chapter 19 verse 8, the one who gets wisdom loves life. The one who cherishes wisdom will soon prosper. Isn't that so powerful? If we come to a place where we pursue for wisdom, life will be better. Life will be more enjoyable. Life will be more exciting. Life will be more fruitful. So I want to encourage you today. Ask of God for wisdom. We need God's help. We need wisdom that comes from God and God himself. And today when we ask God for wisdom, we are able to triumph in life. I would like to round up this day with this particular passage in 1 Kings chapter 3. In verse 16, then came there two women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. And the one said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And came to pass the third day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also. And we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. And she arose at midnight and took my son beside me, while that handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid a dead child in my bosom. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. And the other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one, and half to the other. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king. For her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divided. And verse 27, then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. Verse 28, and all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. Beloved, we need wisdom like this. We need wisdom like Solomon. What a beautiful story of how Solomon